So Melissa did We the Artists. All did Phoenix Rising. Jamani did On the Front Line. Did The Last Responder. Yes. So, questions, comments from people who worked on the film. We also have Gabrielle who did the animation for We the Artists.
You're the artist? You no. Oh, who's the artist?
Amina, yay! Worked on the front line. Yes. So, questions, comments, thoughts?
I do want to say that I really enjoyed everyone's project. I learned a lot about it. It was just really touching. I'm glad to see the front line because I did work on it, but it was really, really good. Like the quality, everything was just amazing. So kudos to you guys.
Woo!
I'll say that I love the intersectionality of all the three different stories that were told. They really blended very well. I love the tying into the root of Philadelphia, of course, and how that like a global problem on both racism, systemic racism, being an artist, and then COVID-19 were all blended and brought to a local level. And I think that was just flawlessly done.
Oh, that's nice.
Thank you so much, and thanks to Stephen for he figured out. He did the interstitials in between his piece. He gleaned a phrase from each of the documentaries to put in between, and I think that just really helped to tie everything together. So thank you.
I have a comment. This was just really interesting to watch after a few years of, all of this happening in 2020 and things feeling so you're in the middle of it, and then as you start distancing yourself from particular things that happened a few years ago, it's like, oh wow, this is how we were feeling at this time. It's kind of hard to remember all of those things, and it's nice to have this particular Philadelphia perspective. So that's really special. And I was going to ask about the interstitials and everything, but were you all thinking about how these would come together as a group during for this whole piece, or were you more thinking about each piece individually?
I think initially we were all sort of working on our own projects. We had talked about doing something collaborative, but we were all sort of working on our own projects around COVID-19. So I think we all were sort of experiencing different things around racism and what was happening. And then I think the more we started to talk, the more we realized that we all sort of had things in common. And so I believe it was Nadine that was just we should make this like a SIFT project. Everybody should sort of do something at the time. It was only 10 of us, I think, originally as members, and we've now expanded to, I think,
35.
35 now. But at the time, it was only, it was about half of us, and then the other half worked this crew and things like that. And so we decided to sort of try to find the thread through for our pieces. And so, then we just all sort of started working together on things. Some of us, I think, originally had longer pieces. Some of them were shorter. But after a while, when it was clear that it was going to become one piece, sort of an anthology, because none of us were doing exactly the same thing, that we started to sort of work with each other more collaboratively and try to think about the order and all of that type of thing. So.
And I would say my piece came out of, I was doing a film with a woman around, particularly sisters, and dealing with how sisters were using yoga and other kinds of techniques to deal with sort of the stressors of being Black women in particularly corporate America or education. And it literally stopped right before COVID. So we ended up doing this piece around Zoom. And I was interviewing my sister, and we just started talking, and I started asking her these questions. And it became this story for beyond really thinking about how individually, how we are not only coping with, but for me, art is always connected with activism. So it's in that process, what can we do? How do we, and in some way, does it transform us or enlighten us in some way? So that sort of, and Nadine I actually shared it with Nadine, and Nadine was like, "Oh, that's a great piece." So I transcribed, because I think we talked for 2 hours. My sister and I are pretty loquacious, and I transcribed. It was like 27, 30 pages or whatever, and then pulling the pieces out. So it was, for me, it was a wonderful tribute, but also very insightful. And she is from Philly, so
She's from Philly, she's Mount Airy.
She went to Central. She was one of the first girls in the Central crew.
Yeah, I would say it was an isolating time, so it was just great to be able to be collaborative with everyone and build off of our ideas. And then Nadine and Nikki were really encouraging us to reach out to other members in the group, and there was a very small budget, so we were like, okay, how can we also hire and work with other people? Grateful for the budget. So for me, I got to like just think more creatively. How can we can't really be out filming too much right now. So how can we have this process be different? So that's, I got to reach out and work with Gabrielle and have that amazing animation. And then Tatiana helped with the editing and the voiceover. Nikki recommended I reach out to someone else for some of the, what do you call it? The drone footage? Yeah. So it was great to just be able to push myself,
do something different.
Think creatively during that time.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. That's great. And I guess as the executive producer, I saw the commonality, but it wasn't until I watched each piece over and over and over and over and over again that the thread for me was the sadness of the period of COVID and the rage that we still have to fight for our humanity with the George Floyd murder, that rage, and all the other murders, the rage and the sadness, and Naya expresses that perfectly in Phoenix Rising, but then how that transformed through the yoga practice and through art. After she drew the painting of herself screaming, and then the hands holding the ball of light of service. That was the common thread for me for each and every film, from sadness to rage to service. Each film has those components. I'm like, that's our theme, that's our through line, okay? And it's so simple, yet it's so profound, and it is so Philly. It's so Philly, right? People found a way to help each other through mutual aid and using art and activism together to make a change in their community. So that to me was just, that's what I was seeing as someone who was involved, but not directing a piece, but looking at the whole entire ensemble of four films. And the music, hey, Mike Moore, raise your hand again. Weaving the images together, then Mike Moore weave, just mix. I'm telling you, the piece before this, there's the piece before the sound mix, and then the piece after the sound mix. And before the sound mix, I thought it was good, but when you have the sound mix, it just takes it to another level. So.
But talk about who did the music.
Oh, and Ursula Rucker, sorry. So I get obsessive about things. This is my filmmaker in me. I obsess like a child. I listen to things over and over again. And the piece needed original music, but also something familiar. So in 2006, on Ursula Rucker's Mama, NAAT Mama album, CD, she had a piece called Libations. And it's a piece that she often performs in public now with Tim Motzer. And I thought that piece expressed the sadness, the rage, and the service beautifully. Because she recalled our ancestors, pour libations for the ancestors, those known and unknown, those that we remember, those that are forgotten. And there were so many ancestors that were elevated that made transition during this period, so many. And that song for me epitomizes the time period in which we're going through. We're still going through COVID season right now.
China.
So, still going through it.
China. That's all
China.
I
I don't know.
Be ready.
So but through that music, it also changes, it does that same thing that the Filmmakers did, which is changing the rage and the sadness to service, to uplift, and to give us hope. So that selection of the track was key. And then working with Lenny Seidman and Tim Monster. Tim Monster was on guitar, he played the guitar, and he also bowed his guitar using a bow. So that's that drone sound, so he's bowing his guitar. And then Lenny Seidman's on tablet and percussion. And Ursula also did some percussion with the bell sounds that you hear. So it was a very heartfelt soundtrack by master Philadelphia musicians.
And let me just clarify, when I say China, we have to, the numbers. I mean, I don't know if anybody's been listening to the news, but yes. And remember, if it's over on the border, because we live in a global economy, a global world,
Yeah, it's not over.
then we need to be prepared because it will be here. So I'm just saying that, and because I'm not talking, well, let me not even mention anything,
No,
anybody else. I'm just saying that we need to be conscious of it because sometimes we think in watching this, because it was in 2020, that it is over, but it's not over.
And we're still in COVID season.
Right.
We're still in COVID season. Good question, thank you, Leanne. Any other comments? Questions? Well, y'all wanna eat something? We have some popcorn, you can eat, you can drink a little, and talk to